Hello. Hello, what do you want? So, mainstream news are lame? Alright, just one moment. Well, hello there. Thanks for tuning in to Just One Moment's first ever episode. On this channel, I will cast my eye over the blatant bias and double standards, or shall we call it propaganda effort, that the mainstream media in the Western world is peddling. Of course, Russian or Chinese media outlets are also no strangers to half-truth and towing the party line, I guess, but my focus for the most part will be on the Anglo-Saxon press. Mainly because that's the one I get to see every day. I'm being bombarded with it. My taxes pay for it. But also because I'm kind of sick of their holier-than-thou self-righteousness, their laughable claims to be fair and balanced in their reporting on all things politics or global affairs. Anyhow, let me dedicate this first video to the good old ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. A lot of people call her endearingly Auntie ABC because, like a lifelong relative, she's been joining Aussies for the past 70 years or so in their living rooms every day. But far out has she turned nasty in her old age. Their news department, while certainly not as much of a shocker as some others out there in the big wide world of disinfo pushers, their spin masters also practice the dark art of pulling the wool over people's eyes. And I don't know for how long, but it seems to me for decades now, if they've been engaged in whipping up anti-Russian and anti-Chinese sentiment. It seems to me like hardly a week goes by without at least a couple of articles on their news websites or radio and TV segments where they portray Russia and China in the grimmest light possible, and their politicians as the wicked witches of the East who forever do evil things, while at the same time ignoring the fact that Australian, European, or US leaders are just as bad, if not worse. So here we go. ABC's news latest attempt to manipulate Australian public opinion couldn't be more obvious. 3 stories in the last 24 hours alone on China. From protests in Hong Kong, as a matter of fact there's 2 right here, about how the police is using tear gas to deal with militant protesters trying to storm government buildings, to how Australia might need nuclear weapons to fend off the Chinese invasion, and on the fact that China has a base inside Australia's Antarctic territory, which we can't access. Oh my lordy. Yet not a word about how the cops in France violently beat up peaceful protesters or douse young people in chemicals, simply for daring to speak out against the mass extinction that's happening on our planet at the moment. I guess the difference being China is a declared enemy, while France is a Western ally. So yeah, I mean, let's check this out, right? So the first 2 stories here. Hong Kong's freedom generation was always going to rebel against its Chinese future. Yeah, always going to rebel. Well, in Australia, if you go and rebel, geez, they're going to smash your head in before you even know it. So here, as tensions boil over again amid fears over Chinese control. So we need to fear the Chinese. That's the gist of every story that we get on China. Yeah. Here, China has a base deep inside Australia's Antarctic territory. Oh, God. Yeah, so much drama. And here we now need a nuclear-armed Australia to fight the Chinese. Right? So this is just 4 stories right here on the main news feed on the ABC. Now, if we have a look at what's going down in France, let's check this one here out. This cop is bashing the head in of the guy as if he'd be a meth head trying to crack open a coconut. There's blood running down his cheeks and his neck. All right. Brutal. Brutal. And here, what's going down? This is just a couple of days ago. 3 coppers holding down a protester, and the 4th one is just laying into him. Right? If this would happen in Venezuela or Moscow, we'd see it day and night on our tellies and the news feeds. But because it's happening in France, not a word on Australian mainstream news. Yeah, we could more of those examples, right? So what's the story here? Police pepper spray protesters who dare to speak up about the extinction that's happening on our planet, the wholesale extinction of species, and in their face, pepper sprayed, dragged off across the concrete, right? Again, here, if this would happen in Damascus or somewhere else where the eye of our mainstream news is focused on, you would never hear the end of it. All right. Yet on ABC News, all we get is China. China, Russia, and more China, and more Russia. Okay, so this is how they try to manipulate and influence the conversation here. How nobody's ever meant to talk about France or any police brutalities in Germany or in the US. Yeah, but Lordy, if something happens in China or Russia, they're like flies all over it. And to top it all off, I mean, this was the best part, right? I mean, I almost fell off my chair when I read this. This again here on ABC News. Australia may need to consider nuclear weapons to counter China's dominance, defense analyst says. Okay, so one of Australia's leading defense analysts has warned the nation may have to consider the difficult question of whether or not to acquire nuclear weapons as part of a strategy to counter the rise of China. I mean, this guy's insane, right? Whilst the entire planet is trying to convince North Koreans to not, continue with their nuclear armaments and sanction the Iranians for, trying to get nuclear energy happening in their country. This guy actually has the goal to go onto national television and point out that we will need, most likely, or in the worst case scenario, nuclear weapons to defend the country. I mean, this is madness. Okay, so this guy's actually a professor at the Australian University, Professor Hugh White, and he goes as far as to say that Australia needs to spend, instead of 2% of GDP, it now needs to go and spend 3.5%. In other words, almost double its military expenditure, right? Further down in the article here, it says the ANU professor also warned the Australian Defence Force will need to buy more than double the current 72 planned Joint Strike Fighter aircraft if it wants to properly defend the country. So instead of buying 70 of those useless Joint Strike Fighters, he suggests we buy 150 of them. I mean, on which planet does this guy live, right? Same with the submarines. Very expensive submarines, and we need to buy more of those. Jesus, I mean, that just goes to show where Australia is at the moment. And this is mainstream news, where this is, being promoted as an well thought through opinion by somebody who should know. My. Yeah, so what do you say? This is where it's at. Australian mainstream media, which state-funded ABC News, I mean, it's funded by the taxpayer. The head of ABC News is appointed by the Prime Minister. So in a sense, it's a bit like the Russian Pravda was 30 years ago, or Soviet Union, I should say. So they're leading the way, engaged in a full-blown propaganda effort to massage the public into accepting that massive amounts of tax dollars will need to be spent on buying double the number of American fighter jets, double the number of submarines, and even going as far as suggesting the country should arm itself with nukes. At a time when budget is constantly in the red, government services are being cut, people on meager unemployment benefits with barely enough to survive, yet the public is being conned into believing that what's most important is that Australian taxpayers double the funding for weapons purchases. I mean, holy F. This is nothing short of the crazy people running the asylum. Well, anyhow, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. In any case, if you agree with me that the mainstream media is lame, and that's to be polite, feel free to leave me a like and possibly share the video across your platforms. And should you feel like hearing more about just how absurd and ridiculous the propaganda efforts of our Western overlords are, subscribe to the channel. I will upload all videos also to Minds. So if one day you find YouTube has closed down this channel, head on over to Minds and look for One Moment there. Okay, till next time.